Let me ask you something straight. If you had somewhere between $100,000 and $300,000 sitting in your account, and you wanted one car that could eat 500 miles of highway without making your back scream, then pull out of a rest stop and embarrass something half its size, what would you buy? That's the whole game with GT cars. Grand Touring, the category that's supposed to do everything at once, comfortable enough to live with, fast enough to make you grin like an idiot, and built well enough that you're not standing on the side of the road in the rain calling a tow truck. I've gone through the specs, the independent test numbers, the real-world ownership data, and I put together what I believe are the 5 best GT cars you can actually buy in 2026. Not the flashiest 5, not the most expensive 5. The 5 that actually deliver on what a GT car is supposed to be. If you're new here, subscribe right now, because we don't do brochure talk, no fluff, just honest information you can actually use. Now let's get into it. Number 5, 2026 Bentley Continental GT Speed. Starting price, around $352,000. I know what you're thinking. That's not a car for most people, and you're right. But if we're talking about the best GT cars in the world, you don't get to leave out the car that might be the most complete version of what a GT car is supposed to be. The 2026 Continental GT Speed runs a powertrain that Bentley calls the Ultra Performance Hybrid. It pairs a twin-turbocharged W12 engine with an electric motor, and when you put them together, you get 771 horsepower and 738 pound-feet of torque. Bentley claims a 0 to 60 time of 3.3 seconds and a top speed of 208 miles per hour. Now here's where it gets interesting. Car and Driver put the GT Speed through independent testing, and they came back with a 0 to 60 time of 2.8 seconds. That's not a typo. 2.8 seconds in a car that weighs roughly 5,500 pounds and has enough interior leather to reupholster a small aircraft. Inside is where Bentley earns its reputation. The diamond-quilted leather, the hand-stitched details, the optional rotating display that flips between a central touchscreen and a traditional panel with 3 analog gauges. It's the kind of cabin that makes you want to get in and drive somewhere far away just to spend more time sitting in it. You also get Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, built-in Wi-Fi, and over-the-air updates, so the technology side of things is current. Here's the honest buyer's take on this car. The Continental GT Speed is the definition of having it all. It's fast enough to embarrass sports cars. It's comfortable enough to do 800 miles in a day without suffering. And it does both of those things simultaneously without making you feel like you're compromising either direction. That's rare. That's genuinely rare in any car at any price. The reason it's at number 5 instead of higher on this list is that at $352,000, most of the people watching this video are not going to buy one. And the cars above it on this list are arguably more focused and more interesting from a pure driving standpoint. But make no mistake, if someone handed you the keys to a GT Speed and said drive it anywhere you want, you would have a very hard time finding something to complain about. Number 4. 2026 Porsche Panamera GTS. Starting price around $169,250. Now we're talking about a car that does something the Continental GT Speed does not do. It fits 4 people comfortably, handles like a sports car, and costs roughly half as much while still being genuinely excellent at everything it attempts. The Panamera GTS for 2026 uses a 4.0-liter twin-turbocharged V8 with 493 horsepower and 486 pound-feet of torque. It runs through Porsche's 8-speed PDK dual-clutch transmission and sends power to all 4 wheels. With the Sport Chrono package, which most buyers add, Porsche lists the 0 to 60 time at 3.6 seconds, and the quarter mile comes in around 12.1 seconds. Top speed is 188 miles per hour. The hardware that makes this possible includes Porsche Torque Vectoring Plus, which actively distributes power between the rear wheels to help the car rotate cleanly through corners. Inside, the current generation Panamera has a 12.6-inch curved instrument display, a 12.3-inch center touchscreen, and an available 10.9-inch passenger display. Importantly, Porsche kept physical climate switches and a real volume knob. For anyone who has dealt with a car where every single function requires digging through touchscreen menus at highway speed, you understand immediately why that matters. The honest buyer take is this. The Panamera GTS is probably the most practical car on this list if you have a family and you need to carry people in the back seat regularly. It does not sacrifice the driving experience to do it. It does not feel like a watered-down version of a real GT car. At $169,250, it's significantly more approachable than the cars above it on this list. And for a lot of buyers, that combination of capability and practicality makes it the smartest choice on the entire list. Number 3. 2026 Aston Martin DB12. Starting price, around $265,500. The DB lineage goes back to David Brown, who owned Aston Martin starting in 1947. The DB cars have always been the grand touring flagships, the ones built for long-distance elegance with enough performance underneath to back up the styling. The DB12 is the most powerful and most technologically capable DB in the company's history. Under the hood is a 4.0-liter twin-turbocharged V8, producing 671 horsepower and 590 pound-feet of torque. That engine shares roots with the AMG unit used in several Mercedes-AMG products, but Aston tunes it extensively for their own purposes. Power goes to the rear wheels through an 8-speed automatic with an electronic rear differential. Aston Martin claims 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds and a top speed of 202 miles per hour. Those are supercar numbers in a car that looks like it belongs parked outside a 5-star hotel rather than a racing circuit. The interior is the other half of the DB12's argument. A 10.25-inch driver display alongside a 10.25-inch central touchscreen, natural voice controls, wireless phone charging, and the optional Bowers & Wilkins audio system with up to 15 speakers and 1,170 watts. On a long highway run with good music playing through that system, the miles genuinely disappear. The honest buyer take on the DB12 is that this is the most emotionally satisfying car on this list. It's not the most powerful. It's not the most technologically complex, but it looks extraordinary, it sounds extraordinary when the exhaust opens up, and it covers ground with a kind of effortless confidence that makes you feel like you could drive to the other coast and not want to stop. That combination of beauty and genuine capability is something Aston Martin has been chasing for decades, and the DB12 is the best version of it they've ever produced. Before we get into the top 2, real quick, if you're finding this useful, the honest specs, the actual test numbers, the real buyer perspective with no brochure talk, hit subscribe. Alright, top 2. This is where it gets serious. Number 2. 2026 Ford Mustang GTD. Starting price, $327,960. Let's take a moment to appreciate the fact that that sentence exists. A Mustang, with a base price of $327,960. The GTD is not a regular Mustang with a bigger engine bolted in. Ford built it from a completely different philosophy. The engine is a dry-sump supercharged 5.2-liter V8 producing 815 horsepower and 664 pound-feet of torque. It pairs with a rear-mounted 8-speed dual-clutch transaxle, meaning the transmission sits at the back of the car rather than in the traditional location behind the engine. That layout improves weight distribution significantly and makes the car behave more like something engineered from the rear axle forward. Ford claims a top track speed of 202 miles per hour. Car and Driver independently tested the GTD and measured 0 to 60 in 2.8 seconds, along with more than 1.17 grams of lateral grip. That grip number tells you exactly what category of tires and chassis you're dealing with. Normal high-performance cars produce somewhere around 1.0 grams. The GTD operates in a completely different world. The proof of concept for this car isn't just the specification sheet. It's the Nürburgring lap time. Ford officially recorded a lap of 6 minutes and 57.2 seconds around the Nordschleife. That is faster than many dedicated track cars. The GTD did it with license plates on. Inside, the GTD is notably less luxurious than everything else on this list. The dual displays are there, the build quality is reasonable, but the overall vibe is focused cockpit rather than grand touring lounge. That is honestly appropriate given what this car is designed to do. But if you're planning to use it primarily as a highway cruiser rather than a regular track car, the interior experience is a step down from the Aston or the Bentley. The honest buyer's take is that the Mustang GTD is the most extreme interpretation of a GT car that any American manufacturer has produced in the modern era. It is genuinely world-class in terms of what it can do on a road or a circuit. And when you compare the $327,960 price tag against European alternatives with similar performance credentials, it starts to look like reasonable value, which is a sentence nobody expected to write about a Mustang. Number 1. 2026 Porsche 911 Carrera 4S. Starting price around $140,000. I know some of you were expecting the 911 GT3 RS here, and that's a fair argument. The GT3 RS is a technical marvel, but the GT3 RS is not really a GT car in the practical sense. It's a track car with license plates. The ride is punishing on regular roads, the Cup 2 tires need heat to work properly, and it's genuinely difficult to use as regular transportation without wearing yourself out. The 911 Carrera 4S is the car that best represents what a GT car is supposed to be in 2026, and it does it at a price that's far more accessible than anything else on this list. A 3.0-liter twin-turbocharged flat-six producing 443 horsepower and 390 pound-feet of torque. All-wheel drive through Porsche's latest system, an 8-speed PDK dual-clutch transmission. Porsche quotes 0 to 60 in 3.4 seconds with the Sport Chrono package and a top speed of 190 miles per hour. Those numbers are not the most extreme on this list. That's intentional. The Carrera 4S is not trying to win the horsepower argument, it's trying to win the complete package argument, and it does. In a long-term test published by Road and Track, a 911 Carrera covered over 40,000 miles without a single mechanical issue. That kind of dependability matters when you're talking about a car you plan to drive seriously and regularly rather than park in a climate-controlled garage and look at on weekends. Here is what makes the 911 Carrera 4S the best GT car on this list. It is the only car here that does absolutely nothing poorly. The GTD is more exciting but less comfortable. The DB12 is more beautiful but more expensive to maintain. The Panamera is more practical but less engaging. The Bentley is more opulent but costs more than twice as much. The 911 Carrera 4S hits every single requirement for a great GT car and hits them consistently, mile after mile, year after year. If you are looking for one car to do it all, long highway trips, occasional track days, daily driving, weekend canyon runs, the 2026 Porsche 911 Carrera 4S is the answer. It's not the most dramatic answer, it's not the answer that turns the most heads in a parking lot, but it is the correct answer, and experienced car people have been arriving at that same conclusion for about 60 years. That's the list. 5 cars, 5 different answers to the same question. And honestly, you could make a reasonable argument for any one of them depending on what you're prioritizing. Here's what I want to know from you. Which one would you actually buy and why? Drop it in the comments below. I read all of them, and the debates that happen down there on these videos are usually better than anything I could put in the script. If you're not subscribed yet, now is the time. New video every single day. Real specs, real test numbers, honest buyer perspective, and no nonsense. Hit subscribe, leave your pick in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.